He built an empire where grown men feared his silence, but nothing terrified Mafia boss Vincent Moretti more than the sound of his blind son crying in public. Rain pressed softly against the tall windows of Belladonna's steakhouse, turning the Chicago skyline into a blur of silver lights and shadows while the restaurant held its breath around table 12. Everyone knew who Vincent Moretti was. Men in tailored suits lowered their voices when he entered. Waiters straightened their backs. Even the piano player near the marble bar missed notes after spotting the dark-haired man seated beneath the chandelier with two small children beside him. Vincent sat perfectly still in his charcoal suit, one hand resting near a crystal glass untouched for nearly 20 minutes, his sharp jaw tight beneath the warm amber lighting. But it wasn't the feared Mafia boss drawing attention tonight. It was the twins. 8-year-old Noah and Lily Moretti sat quietly across from him, dressed in matching navy sweaters, their pale fingers resting uncertainly against the polished tablecloth as if searching for an invisible edge to hold onto. Their unfocused eyes moved toward sounds instead of faces. Toward breathing instead of light. Toward fear instead of comfort. And everyone in the restaurant noticed. Some customers looked away too quickly, embarrassed by their own pity. Others stared too long. A woman near the wine display whispered something to her husband while glancing toward the children, and Vincent noticed that too. He noticed everything. That was the problem. "Sir." The voice came gently from beside the table. Amara Brooks stood holding a tray against her hip, her dark curls tied neatly back, her white shirt sleeves rolled to her elbows from a double shift she could already feel in her aching feet. She had been warned about table 12 the moment she clocked in. Don't make eye contact too long. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't upset the children. Most importantly, don't upset him. But as Amara looked at the twins, she didn't see danger. She saw exhaustion. The kind children carried when the world constantly reminded them they were different. "Your steaks will be ready in just a few minutes," she said softly. Lily tilted her head toward the sound of Amara's voice immediately. "You smell like cinnamon," the little girl whispered. The words caught Amara off guard for half a second before a small smile touched her lips. "That's because I spilled cinnamon syrup on my apron this morning." Lily smiled faintly at that, but before another word could be spoken, a sharp sound cracked through the dining room. A waiter nearby had dropped a serving tray. Glass shattered across the marble floor like gunfire. Noah flinched violently. His hands slammed over his ears as panic rushed across his face. "Noah," Vincent said firmly, already reaching toward him. But the boy was spiraling too fast now, breathing hard, shoulders trembling, trapped inside a darkness that sounded too loud to survive. Conversations around the restaurant stopped. Silverware froze midair. Noah's breathing became the only thing anyone could hear. One of Vincent's bodyguards stepped forward uncertainly while the manager whispered harshly at staff to clean the mess faster, but it was too late. The damage had already spread across the room like smoke. Then Amara moved. Slowly. Carefully. She crouched beside Noah's chair, ignoring the stunned look from the manager across the dining room. Ignoring the dangerous stillness radiating from Vincent Moretti himself. She didn't touch the boy. Didn't force anything. She simply leaned close enough for him to hear her voice beneath the noise. "The noise can't hurt you," she whispered gently. 4 simple words. That was all. Noah's shaking paused almost instantly. His breathing caught. Then slowly, unbelievably, his trembling fingers loosened from his ears. The entire table froze. Noah reached blindly toward the sound of Amara's voice until his small hand found hers. And for the first time that entire night, silence inside the restaurant no longer felt afraid. The silence lasted only a few seconds, but inside Belladonna's steakhouse, those seconds stretched long enough for every person in the room to feel something shift. Noah Moretti still held Amara's hand tightly, his small fingers trembling less now as the panic slowly drained from his body. The shattered glass had already been swept away, the the musicians near the bar quietly returning to their instruments, but nobody truly resumed eating. People were watching table 12 without pretending not to anymore. Watching the most feared man in Chicago stare at a waitress like he could not understand what had just happened. Vincent Moretti had spent years controlling every room he entered. Judges listened carefully around him. Politicians measured their words around him. Men twice his age lost confidence under his stare. Yet none of that power had helped him calm his son 30 seconds ago. His expensive therapists could not do it. The private specialists flown in from New York could not do it. Even Vincent himself usually needed 20 exhausting minutes to guide Noah out of sensory panic. But this woman had done it with one sentence spoken softer than rain against glass. Amara slowly eased her hand back, careful not to startle the boy again. "You did really good," she told Noah gently. "Your breathing sounds much calmer now." Noah nodded once, still facing toward her voice. "You sound warm," he whispered. The words hit Vincent harder than they should have. Lily tilted her head slightly beside her brother, smiling faintly into the empty space ahead of her. "I told you she smelled like cinnamon." For the first time that evening, something almost human touched Vincent's expression. Not a smile exactly. More like confusion wrapped around exhaustion. Before another word could settle between them, the restaurant manager appeared beside Amara so quickly she barely had time to stand. Richard Bennett kept his smile aimed politely toward Vincent, but his grip tightened sharply around Amara's elbow. "Excuse us for one moment, sir," he said quickly. "We apologize for the interruption." Amara already knew that tone. It was the same tone managers used before firing people. Richard guided her toward the hallway near the kitchen, his polished shoes moving fast against the marble floor while the warmth disappeared from his face entirely the second they stepped out of sight. "What are you doing?" he hissed under his breath. "Do you have any idea whose table that is?" Amara blinked in confusion. The little boy was scared. "That is not your job." His voice dropped lower. "You serve food. You do not touch VIP guests. You especially do not touch his children." "I did not touch him first," she answered quietly. "He reached for my hand." Richard rubbed both temples like she was creating the worst headache of his week. "Listen carefully to me. Men like Vincent Moretti do not like strangers around their family. If something goes wrong, it does not fall on him. It falls on us." The kitchen doors swung open behind them, carrying out the smell of garlic butter and sizzling steak while cooks shouted orders over clattering pans, but even that noise could not cover the tension tightening inside the hallway. Amara looked back toward the dining room entrance where Noah still sat quietly now beside his father. "He was terrified," she said softly. "I could hear it in his breathing." Richard stared at her for a moment like he could not decide whether she was brave or foolish. "You are here to make rent, Amara," he said finally. "Do not forget that." She lowered her eyes. "I know." But before Richard could continue, a voice behind them cut clean through the hallway. Calm. Controlled. Dangerous only because it did not need to be loud. "The waitress stays." Every sound near the kitchen seemed to die at once. Richard straightened immediately. Amara turned slowly toward the hallway entrance where Vincent Moretti stood alone beneath the low amber lights, one hand resting inside the pocket of his tailored coat while his cold dark eyes remained fixed entirely on her. Then, for the first time all night, the feared Mafia Boss spoke to Amara Brooks directly. "My children would like dessert," he said quietly. "And they asked for you." The dessert arrived beneath soft golden light and absolute silence from the rest of the dining room. Nobody at Belladonna's understood why Vincent Moretti had allowed the waitress to return, but nobody was foolish enough to question it aloud. Amara carried the tray carefully toward table 12 while the weight of dozens of eyes followed her across the polished marble floor. She could feel Richard Bennett practically sweating. Near the kitchen entrance, waiting for disaster to happen. But disaster never came. Noah sat calmer now, one small hand resting beside his water glass while Lily leaned slightly toward the sound of Amara's approaching footsteps before the waitress even reached the table. "That is her," Lily whispered softly to her brother. "The cinnamon lady." Something inside Vincent tightened unexpectedly at those words. Amara placed the desserts down slowly. "One chocolate cake," she said gently, "and one vanilla cheesecake with strawberries." Noah tilted his head slightly. "What do strawberries look like?" The question hit the table with quiet force. Vincent's jaw shifted almost invisibly. The bodyguard nearest the wall looked away. Even the piano player missed another note in the distance. It was obvious this was not the first time the children had asked questions adults struggled to answer. Amara hesitated only half a second before pulling the small dessert plate closer to Noah. "Can I show you differently?" she asked softly. Noah nodded carefully. Amara picked up a strawberry and placed it gently into the boy's hand. "The outside feels smooth because strawberries grow slowly in the sun," she explained. "And the little seeds feel tiny because they carry more strawberries inside them." Noah ran his fingers carefully over the fruit. "It smells sweet." "It does," Amara smiled. "And the color red usually feels warm to people. Like sitting near a fireplace in winter." Lily smiled beside him. "What about chocolate cake?" Amara glanced down at the rich dark dessert before answering. "Chocolate cake feels like Christmas music sounds." Lily let out the smallest laugh. It was soft. Quick. Fragile. But Vincent froze completely when he heard it. His daughter had not laughed inside a restaurant in nearly a year. The sound landed somewhere deep beneath the armor he had spent years building around himself. He looked down slowly at Lily as if hearing her voice for the first time all over again. Amara stepped back slightly, allowing the twins space while they explored their desserts with cautious curiosity instead of fear. She watched the way they listened before every movement. The way their fingers searched gently before touching anything unfamiliar. Children learning the world without sight learned it through trust first. And trust was something these two clearly had not been given enough of lately. Vincent finally spoke after several long seconds. "Where did you learn to speak to them like that?" His deep voice carried low across the table, calm but intensely focused. Amara looked up carefully. "My younger brother was visually impaired," she answered quietly. "He used to say people described the world too fast." Vincent studied her face in silence. There was no pity in her voice when she spoke about blindness. No uncomfortable hesitation either. Only understanding. Real understanding. Noah suddenly turned toward Vincent. "Can she come back tomorrow?" The question landed harder than any negotiation Vincent had faced all year. He stared at his son for a moment because Noah rarely asked for people. The twins had spent the past 18 months withdrawing from nearly everyone after the accident. Teachers quit. Specialists rotated constantly. Caregivers lasted days at best. But now Noah sat calmly eating cake while asking for a waitress he met less than 30 minutes ago. Vincent's fingers tightened once around the crystal glass near his hand. Then slowly, almost cautiously, he looked back toward Amara. "Do you work tomorrow night?" he asked. Before she could answer, a woman's sharp voice suddenly cut through the dining room behind them. "Vincent." Every muscle at the table seemed to stiffen instantly. The temperature around table 12 changed the moment the woman's voice cut through the dining room. Every waiter near the marble bar suddenly found something else to do. Conversations lowered instinctively. Even Amara, who knew almost nothing about Vincent Moretti's world, could feel tension move across the restaurant like cold air before a storm. The woman approaching them wore a cream-colored coat draped perfectly over her shoulders, diamonds glittering softly beneath the chandelier light while expensive heels clicked sharply against the floor. Evelyn Sinclair looked like the kind of woman magazines called elegant and men called untouchable. Tall. Blonde. Perfectly composed. But the moment her eyes landed on Amara standing beside the table, something unpleasant flickered beneath her polished smile. "There you are," Evelyn said smoothly to Vincent, leaning down to kiss his cheek with practiced familiarity. "I have been calling for 20 minutes. Vincent barely moved. "I turned my phone off." Evelyn's eyes shifted toward the twins. "The children should be home by now. It is almost 9 o'clock. Her tone sounded gentle enough, but Noah's shoulders tightened immediately at the sound of her voice. Lily reached carefully toward her brother beneath the table until their hands found each other. Amara noticed it instantly. So did Vincent. Evelyn finally looked directly at Amara. Her gaze traveled slowly over the waitress uniform, the rolled sleeves, the worn black shoes from standing 10-hour shifts. "And who is this?" she asked, though the answer was obvious. "Amara," Lily answered before anyone else could speak. "She explains things good." Evelyn blinked once, surprised the little girl had spoken at all. Vincent's expression remained unreadable. "She works here," he said simply. "The children like her." Something about those words made Evelyn's smile tighten almost invisibly. She sat gracefully beside Vincent, setting her designer purse onto the tablecloth while Amara instinctively stepped back half a pace. "That is understandable," Evelyn said lightly. "Children become attached to voices very easily when they cannot see faces." The sentence sounded harmless at first. Polite even. But the deeper meaning settled slowly across the table like dust. Amara felt it immediately. So did Vincent. Evelyn reached for her wine glass casually. "Especially children who are confused after trauma. Specialists warn against emotional dependency on strangers." Noah lowered his fork quietly onto the dessert plate. Lily's smile disappeared. The twins suddenly seemed smaller somehow beneath the restaurant lights. Amara kept her face calm because she had learned long ago that humiliation felt worse when people watched you react to it. "I should get back to work," she said softly. But before she could turn away, Noah spoke. Into the silence with a trembling honesty only children possessed. "We are not confused." Evelyn looked startled. Noah's unfocused eyes remained lowered toward the tablecloth while his fingers tightened around Lily's hand. "She talks to us normal," he whispered. "Not sad." The restaurant around them seemed to disappear completely after those words. Vincent slowly leaned back in his chair, his gaze shifting toward Evelyn with dangerous quiet. Not anger. Something colder than anger. Disappointment. Evelyn forced a small laugh. "I was only trying to help." "No," Vincent said calmly. "You were trying to explain my children instead of listening to them." The sentence landed softly, but the effect was immediate. Evelyn's face lost color beneath the warm chandelier light. Nobody at the table moved. Nobody breathed too loudly. Across the room, Richard Bennett looked moments away from fainting entirely. Then Lily turned her face gently toward Amara again. "Are you leaving?" she asked quietly. Amara hesitated. Something fragile in the little girl's voice pulled painfully at her chest because she recognized that fear. The fear of people disappearing after one kind moment. She crouched slightly beside the table again. "I still have tables to take care of," she answered softly, "but I am not disappearing." Noah relaxed almost instantly at those words. Vincent watched the exchange in complete silence while something unfamiliar pressed heavily against his ribs. For months his children had recoiled from nearly everyone around them. Yet tonight they trusted a waitress they had known less than an hour. And somewhere deep beneath all the control Vincent Moretti built his life upon, a dangerous realization began quietly taking shape. His children did not need more protection. They needed someone who made the darkness feel less lonely. By the time Belladonna's finally closed for the night, the rain outside had turned heavier, drumming softly against the darkened windows while exhausted staff stacked chairs and wiped down tables beneath dim amber lights. The smell of coffee, melted butter, and wet pavement lingered through the restaurant like the final breath of a long evening. "Amara." stood alone near the service station rolling silverware into folded napkins, trying to focus on the simple rhythm of work instead of the strange weight the night had left inside her chest. She had spent years learning how to disappear into jobs like this. Smile politely. Deliver plates. Keep moving. People rarely remembered waitresses after they paid the check. But tonight felt different. Tonight 2 children with sightless eyes had looked directly into her heart without ever seeing her face. You handled that table better than I expected. Richard Bennett's voice startled her from behind. The manager loosened his tie tiredly while glancing toward the now empty dining room. Most people freeze around Vincent Moretti. Amara gave a faint shrug. The children were scared. That was all I saw. Richard studied her carefully for a moment before lowering his voice. Do you even know who that man is? I know people here are afraid of him. Smart people are. He sighed heavily, rubbing one hand across his forehead. Still. I have worked in this city 20 years and I have never seen those twins react to someone the way they reacted to you. Amara lowered her eyes toward the silverware in her hands. They just needed someone to slow the world down for them. Richard frowned slightly. Where did you learn that? The question pulled something old and fragile loose inside her. For several seconds she simply listened to the rain tapping softly against the windows because memories always sounded louder at night. My little brother Isaiah lost most of his vision when he was 6, she said quietly. Doctors called it degenerative optic nerve disease. He could still see shapes at first. Shadows. Light from windows. But every year the darkness got worse. Richard's expression softened. Amara folded another napkin carefully before continuing. People used to talk around him instead of to him. Teachers would grab his arm without warning. Kids stared at him like he was broken. Her voice remained calm, but grief sat quietly beneath every word. So I started describing things differently for him. The smell of snow before it fell. The way jazz music sounded blue at night. How pancakes hissed when they hit the skillet on Sunday mornings. A small smile touched her lips briefly at the memory. He said it helped him feel included in rooms he could not fully see. Richard stayed silent now. The entire restaurant seemed quieter somehow around her story. What happened to him? He asked gently. Amara's hands paused against the silverware. 3 winters ago he caught pneumonia. The sentence came softly. Simply. But pain settled heavily into the space afterward anyway. She blinked once before continuing to work because some losses never became easier to carry. You only learned how to keep moving while carrying them. After he passed, she whispered, I stopped working at the center for visually impaired kids. I could not walk those halls anymore. Richard looked down at the polished floor for a moment. So you became a waitress instead. She nodded faintly. Hospital bills do not disappear just because people do. Before Richard could answer, the sound of slow footsteps crossed the empty dining room behind them. Both turned instinctively. Vincent Moretti stood near the front entrance beneath the soft glow of the chandelier, rainwater still darkening the shoulders of his black coat like he had walked back through the storm alone. His bodyguards remained outside this time. The restaurant suddenly felt smaller with him inside it again. Vincent's eyes settled directly on Amara. Not cold tonight. Not angry either. Just intensely focused in a way that made silence feel heavier around him. Then he spoke the last thing Amara Brooks expected to hear. My daughter cried when we got home, he said quietly. Because she thought she would never hear your voice again. The restaurant felt almost unreal after midnight. Chairs rested upside down on tables. The piano near the bar stood silent beneath dim golden light, and outside the rain continued falling steadily across downtown Chicago, washing silver reflections along the empty streets. Amara stood frozen beside the service station while Vincent Moretti remained near the entrance watching her with the same impossible intensity that had unsettled her all night. Richard Bennett quietly muttered something. About checking inventory before disappearing toward the kitchen, leaving the two of them alone in the heavy silence. Vincent stepped forward slowly, expensive leather shoes brushing softly against the marble floor. Up close he looked more exhausted than intimidating now. The sharp control remained in his posture, but fatigue lived beneath it like a shadow that never slept. "Lily does not cry often," he said quietly. "Not anymore." Amara folded her hands together to steady herself. "I am sorry she was upset. Do not apologize for being kind to my children." The words came immediately, almost rougher than he intended. Vincent glanced briefly toward the rain-streaked windows before speaking again. Most people either pity them or fear saying the wrong thing. His jaw tightened faintly. "You spoke to them like they were still children instead of tragedies." Amara lowered her eyes because she understood exactly what he meant. After Isaiah lost his sight, strangers had treated him like grief wearing a little boy's body instead of a person. "Children notice tone before words," she said softly. "Especially when they cannot rely on faces." Vincent stared at her for several long seconds. "Noah asked about you the entire drive home." Something almost fragile crossed his expression then disappeared just as quickly. He wanted to know if cinnamon always smells warm. Despite herself, Amara smiled faintly. "Sometimes it smells like Christmas. Sometimes it smells like burnt toast depending on who is cooking." A quiet sound escaped Vincent before he could stop it. Not quite laughter. More like surprise at remembering how. The silence afterward softened slightly between them. Rain tapped steadily against the glass while somewhere in the kitchen a dishwasher hummed faintly in the background. Vincent finally reached into the inside pocket of his coat and removed a simple white business card. No gold lettering. No flashy design. Just a phone number beneath his name. He held it out toward her carefully. "Tomorrow night," he said, "the twins have dinner at home." Amara blinked once. "Sir. I want you to come." She stared at the card without taking it yet. Every warning signal in. Her life started screaming at once. Men like Vincent Moretti did not invite waitresses into their homes for ordinary reasons. His world was the kind normal people wisely stayed far away from. Vincent seemed to read the hesitation in her face immediately. "This is not about me," he said calmly. "It is about them." Amara finally accepted the card slowly between her fingers. The paper felt strangely heavy. "I am not a therapist." "I know." His dark eyes held hers steadily. "That is why they trust you." The honesty in that answer unsettled her more than intimidation would have. Before she could respond, Vincent's phone vibrated sharply in his hand. He glanced down at the screen, and something in his expression changed instantly. Tension returned. Control snapped back into place like armor sliding over old wounds. He answered quietly, listening for only a few seconds before ending the call. "The twins are awake again," he said. "Noah refuses to sleep until he knows whether the cinnamon waitress is real or whether he imagined her." The sentence landed softly between them, but Amara felt it deep in her chest. Vincent stepped toward the door again, pausing only once before leaving. "You told my son the noise could not hurt him," he said without turning around. Tonight was the first night in 18 months he believed someone. Then he disappeared into the rain, leaving Amara alone beneath the dim restaurant lights holding a business card she already knew was going to change her life. Amara barely slept after that night. The business card remained on the small kitchen table inside her apartment beside an unpaid electric bill and a half-empty cup of cold tea while rainwater crawled slowly down the fire escape outside her window. Chicago sounded different after midnight in Queensbridge apartments. Sirens farther away. Pipes rattling inside old walls. Neighbors arguing softly through thin ceilings. The city never truly rested, but tonight her thoughts were louder than all of it. By 7 the next evening she stood outside the Moretti estate gripping the strap of her coat tightly while iron gates taller than she was slowly opened before her. The mansion rose behind them. Like something carved from another world entirely. Warm lights glowed through enormous windows while black SUVs lined the circular driveway beneath rows of trimmed hedges still wet from yesterday's storm. Everything about the estate whispered money, power, and distance from ordinary people. Amara almost turned around twice before reaching the front steps. The door opened before she could knock. A gray-haired housekeeper in a navy dress greeted her politely. "Miss Brooks?" "Yes. Mr. Moretti is expecting you." The woman led her through marble hallways that echoed softly beneath crystal chandeliers and framed oil paintings older than anything Amara had ever touched. Yet despite all the luxury surrounding her, the house felt strangely empty. Not physically empty. Emotionally empty. Like nobody laughed here anymore. Then small footsteps suddenly rushed across the hallway upstairs. She came. Lily's voice floated down first, bright with excitement. Noah followed seconds later, one hand brushing carefully along the stair railing while a younger nanny hurried nervously behind them. "Slow down," the nanny warned gently, but neither child listened. Amara's heart tightened instantly watching them move toward her through memory instead of sight. Lily reached the bottom step first and smiled toward the sound of Amara breathing. "You are real." Amara knelt immediately beside them. "I told you I would not disappear." Noah reached carefully until his fingers brushed the sleeve of her coat. Only then did his shoulders finally relax. The simple trust in that tiny movement hit harder than she expected. "The house sounds different today," Noah whispered. Amara listened quietly for a moment. Somewhere distant, rain tapped lightly against tall windows again while a grandfather clock ticked steadily from another room. "It sounds sleepy," she answered softly. Lily smiled. "Papa says the house is too big." "Because it echoes," Noah added seriously. A low voice behind them interrupted gently. "And because my children are honest." Amara looked up slowly. Vincent stood near the entrance to the dining room without his suit jacket tonight, dark sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms while exhaustion shadowed the space beneath his eyes again. But here inside his home, away from restaurants and strangers, something about him seemed less untouchable. More human. The twins moved instinctively toward his voice. Vincent rested one hand briefly against Noah's shoulder before his gaze returned to Amara. "Thank you for coming." "I almost did not." The honesty slipped out before she could stop it. Something faint touched the corner of his mouth. "That makes two of us." Before Amara could understand what he meant, lightning flashed outside the tall windows bright enough to illuminate the entire foyer silver-white for half a second. Then thunder rolled heavily across the sky. Noah flinched instantly. Lily grabbed the front of Amara's sleeve. The lights overhead flickered once. Twice. Then the entire mansion went dark. Complete darkness swallowed the house so suddenly the younger nanny gasped aloud somewhere behind them. The grandfather clock stopped ticking. Rain hammered harder against the windows while somewhere deep in the estate a security alarm beeped once before falling silent too. Noah's breathing immediately turned sharp with panic. "No," he whispered shakily. "No, no, no." Amara felt his small hands begin trembling beside her. And across the darkness of the silent mansion, Vincent Moretti stood helpless all over again. Darkness swallowed the Moretti mansion as rain hammered the windows and the security system died into silence, sending Noah into panic while Lily clung trembling to Amara's sleeve. The younger nanny tried to help, but Vincent quietly stopped her because he recognized the spiral immediately. His children had lived too long inside fear. Yet while the powerful man stood helpless beneath the storm, Amara calmly crouched beside Noah and guided him through the darkness with nothing except patience and warmth. She placed his hand against the wooden staircase and whispered, "The house is warm, which means it is protecting us from the rain." Then she described the humming refrigerator, the distant thunder, and even Vincent's breathing nearby so the twins could rebuild safety through sound instead of sight. Slowly, panic loosened its grip. Amara turned the storm itself into a game, tapping wood to mimic rain on a cabin roof and tracing soft vibrations through a metal candle holder until Lily laughed quietly for the first time all night. Vincent watched in stunned silence as the waitress from Belladonna's did what specialists and doctors never could. She entered the darkness with his children instead of trying to drag them out of it. When the generators restored power, Noah quietly asked the question that shattered something inside Vincent: can she stay tomorrow too? 3 weeks later, snow covered the Moretti estate beneath a pale winter sky, and for the first time since losing their sight, the twins waited excitedly by the patio doors instead of hiding from the world. Guided by Amara, they stepped into fresh snow, feeling cold flakes against their cheeks while she described the sky as silver and the clouds as sleepy. Then Noah touched snow for the first time and smiled with pure joy. Watching his son laugh beneath falling snowflakes, Vincent finally understood he had spent years trying to protect his children with walls, guards, and control, while Amara taught them something far more important: they were never broken to begin with. And standing beneath the winter sky, the feared Vincent Moretti realized his blind children were the first people who truly saw her.